Greetings from Snake Mountain Boat Works on Friday, January 18, 2019. Here's another update on the 1954 Penn Captivator Aristocrat. As you can see, between yesterday and now, we have stripped the hull from the splash rails down to the keel. The splash rails have been removed happily, other than a little filler having been put in them here and there, a little fairing compound, some sort of mystery material elsewhere. The splash rails are in just great shape. We can strip them, we will refinish them, and then reinstall them. That's really good news because these splash rails are, because they're curved, they're longer than the boat is long. This boat's 14 feet long, and it's a really difficult job to steam bend these splash rails because they want to twist as you bend them. So we don't have to do that. That's good news. The other good news is that other than a bunch of the clench nails having to be reset, the fasteners on the strip tight are really in excellent shape. The keel, as we suggested earlier, is truly straight as an arrow and in great shape, despite having been removed at some point for some sort of work that was done on this boat and then reinstalled in a truly odd manner. But let me take you through the steps. I think we can do it right here. The inside the bilge, there's a 3.5 inch by, I'd say, a thick 3/4 inch thick plank that runs the entire length of the bilge. That is the keelson, and it is secured by a series of 1/4 inch, maybe a bit shy of 1/4 inch threaded screws. There are nuts down on the other side of the keelson inside, and this runs the entire length of the boat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and a 10th one I haven't managed to release yet. So this holds the keelson in place. After that, the keel itself is installed, this time with bolts that actually, it was really interesting. It was brass threaded rod with nuts and washers on both ends. So on this end we would see a hex nut, a flat washer, and the end of the threaded rod. Inside the bilge, on the inside or the upper side of the keelson, this threaded rod would protrude all the way through. A nut and a washer was affixed there as well, and that, as you went the entire length, secured the keel. But there are a number of issues. If let's see if I think I have this set correctly. If you can see the black permanent marks I've made here, and here, and they continue all the way along. This is really strange. These don't go anywhere. These have been filled. I can only guess that there at one time were fasteners that ran through these holes and through the keelson, but what's odd is that if you look at the keelson, there are no matching holes. That leads me to the conclusion that at some point in her life, this boat's keelson has been replaced. And maybe that was the time when the keel itself was released as well, because you have to release the keel to release the keelson, since these bolts exit from beneath the keel. You can't get them out unless you have the keel off. Now, so we have the mystery of the myriad of plugged extra holes, and they seem to be plugged in two ways. There was a white oak standard bung on the outside, sanded fair. Pop that out, and you get to this morass of what appears to be the end of toothpicks. So when you look on the backside, well, you see all kinds of mess. But none of these holes are any longer through and through. So there's the mystery of the released keel. And unfortunately, when that keel was reinstalled, and if you'll remember, and I know some of you tire of me referencing Don Dannenberg all the time, but when Don talks about the true 5200 bottom, which this is not and will not be, one of the main, shall we say, points of his sermon is do not scrimp on the 5200. Do not scrimp on the sealant. Oh, that this person, whoever this person was, would have learned that lesson and followed it. Because, as you can see, this keel is more bereft of 5200 than it has 5200 in it. There's a little bit of dab here, there was a dab there, there's a couple dabs up there. Much of the rest of this is just paint. Well, remember that this boat is built, move this right here. This boat is built with a garboard on either side and just a flush seam. This isn't tongue and groove or biscuited or anything. These are just two boards put down with a space between them. The keelson's behind, the keel's on this side, and the hope, and I should say in this case the hope, is that that sandwich will be watertight. Well, hello, ain't gonna be watertight if you've got great big open seams and you have no sealant on either edge to keep water from migrating through the seam, beneath the garboard, beneath the keelson, and into the bilge. If we can look right at the end here, I mean, even worse is the fact that water can just run up the ends of this seam into the boat. So that's actually tight. If we jump a little further down the way here, see if I can get you to here, sort of the middle section of the hull. So here we are behind, yes, we're after the helm seat. We're probably just about to the helm seat right here, but you can see that these two garboards meet with a very open, very much not watertight seam. So, what do we do? How do we repair this? Happily, other than a little bit right here and a little bit back maybe to about, I'd say about here, we don't see any significant black rot. Here, when I pulled it apart, I was treated to the effervescent fragrance of rot. For that reason, we will continue releasing the keel, because we need to know what's behind this. If there's some rot right here, and you can see once again we've got an open channel, water must have worked its way behind this section of keel. We don't know for sure, but the only way we can know for sure is to release this section of keel, which runs right down to and just beneath the splash rail. There's a seam right here. So we will release all of this, not the least of which to allow us to get in behind it, because if this section of keel was treated in the manner that that section was, it's very likely that there are several very welcoming channels for water to follow. So what should have happened? Well, again, quoting Dannenberg, use copious amounts of 5200. When we put this all back together, we will frost this entire thing with 5200, probably about 1/8 of an inch thick, but it will be also filling all declivities. We will have cleaned the backside of the keel by then, sealed it with 3 coats of clear penetrating epoxy sealer, clearly sealing all of this with CPES as well. And then when we install it, it will squeeze out. It's going to make a horrible mess. Fortunately, we have Interlux 333 that will clean it up. And then when we drive all the bolts home, tighten the hex nuts, there will be an absolutely watertight seam along the backbone, along the spine of this wonderful Captivator Aristocrat. Now, as we keep looking, you see that somebody has tried various kinds of fairing compound. We'll be sanding. I'm not sure exactly what we can do with that, but we'll clean it back as far as we can. We will be working to test and search for loose flinch nails. All of those will be tightened. Once again, as with the 1940 Lyman yacht tender, poor RJ gets, in very large quotes, to be the inside guy. He's the guy with the body dolly. I get to be the guy with the hammer and the drift on the outside, and we'll be setting these nails to make sure that we have a good, solid, positive fastening between the strip tight, the garboard and its 2 cousins outboard of it, and then we know that the hull is as tight as it can be. We do encounter another challenge. These are the tails of the strip tight planks, the garboard and related planks as they reach the transom. Yeah, they're black, but I find no evidence of rot, at least on the surface, but down in these fastener holes, the screws simply wouldn't bite any longer, so that tells me the wood in these holes has decayed markedly. How do we deal with that? We will toothpick every one of these using hard rock maple toothpicks and waterproof Gorilla Glue. Every one of these holes will end up flush with solid wood, and then when we install the protective brass strip, the strip that protects the tails of the bottom planking and where it meets the transom, when we install that and drill new holes, everything will bite and be tight. But before that, since we must remove the transom, I need to scrape and sand just here. Not, I don't want to invade here because this is routed out ever so slightly so that when the brass strip is installed, it's absolutely fair with the exterior surface of the bottom planking. Then comes the issue of these 3.5 inch wider planks. And I know it is a terrible issue, terrible challenge. It frustrates us all the time. But what frustrates us even more is when folks try to deal with these open seams using 5200, but do so in a manner that does not really fill the seam. And the problem with the 5200 is that once it cures, it loses a lot of its elasticity. It becomes really hard. Try this for yourself on your boat, on a neighbor's boat. Yeah, do the friend's boat first. Why do your own? And just take a chunk of this stuff out of the bottom that everybody thought was, oh, this is the perfect caulking compound. Not for seams, because as this gets hard and finally cures completely, it can no longer compress. So when these two planks soak up water and try to expand, they expand against an immovable object, which can lead, I don't find evidence of it here, can lead to the wood fibers on each side of the seam getting crushed. And you'll know when you look at a bottom where this has happened. So what we will do is to release at least these two and clean the edges on this seam down here. We will try to leave the third plank in place. I'd really like to leave the second plank in place, but I just don't know if it's going to be possible. We clean all these out, and then the proper material is, you can see, there's no adhesion at all between this stuff and the wood beside it. So all this is decoration. It's not going to slow water. Well, it might slow it down. It comes in at 40 miles an hour rather than 60 miles an hour, but it still comes in. So the proper material, Interlux seam compound for underwater applications, is what you want here. The seam compound will skin over so it can be painted, but it never hardens. So as wood, even when we seal everything with 3 coats of clear penetrating epoxy sealer, there's still going to be some movement. It's just, the CPS is great stuff, and it dramatically reduces the cross-grain movement of wood, but it can't stop it. Wood is wood, and it will still absorb and release a bit of moisture. These seams will tend to close up a little, open up a little over time, while the seam compound, by staying completely flexible beneath that skin, maintains its adherence to the wood on both sides of the seam and keeps this sealed. So you don't have this kind of a result. So we'll clean all that out, and before I do so though, the next step is to start working on along the edges of the transom plank, removing fasteners so that we can release the entire transom plank as a probably not a single piece, because the seam between the planks is open and failed. When we replace the transom, we will biscuit cut and use biscuiting in the seams so that when we glue up the plank, we have a seam that cannot move laterally. In other words, you can't move in and out as this one has. And I had a great conversation with her owner. Her owner has propelled her, powered her with a 20 horsepower Honda since 2006. So his engine is not the culprit in the demise of the transom. Turns out the previous owner was running a 35 horsepower Evinrude Lark, which is a fine engine for this hull. Perfectly fine engine. What's not fine is that he pulled water skiers behind it. This transom is not structured for pulling water skiers. And I know people are going to say, oh, we've had ours for 80 odd years and everything's fine. Bring it by. Let's take a look at it. I'm willing to bet you it's not fine. So we need to replace the transom, make it sound. We'll save every bit of it that we can, but our examination suggests that each of the planks is compromised in different ways. There are a lot of through and through splits. The best way to do it is to do it correctly, not halfway. As some suggested, just replace the bottom plank. That's the one in the water. Well, that's not a proper preservation. As you know, we hate to replace old wood, but in this case we really don't have a choice. We do have quite a storehouse of old mahogany planking taken from boats that were being parted out, so we'll do our best to find some mahogany that has some age on it. If we can't, we'll be using new Honduran mahogany, genuine mahogany, on this transom. So, on Friday, January 18, 2019, this is our update on Captivator, 1954, Penn Captivator Aristocrat. Thank you so much. Bye-bye for now from Snake Mountain Boat Works.